we're just going to get Ratty settled and then I will jump into my September wrap up. We're going to chat about some books that I read. This is not the best lighting in the world, but I'm comfy and I have a cat on me, and frankly that overrules any lighting situations that I may have wanted to make for this video. I finished 7 books in September and I'm pleased with that. I had a good reading month. It was relaxed, it was chilled out, and I read some absolutely fabulous books. So we're going to go chronologically because that's how I function. That's how we're doing it. And she is just going to stay here and suck on this blanket the entire time because that's what she does. So I started the month off with a really short one. I read The Goblin Market and Other Poems by Christina Rossetti. I am not much of a poetry girly, but I am writing a book that is centred around the Goblin Market. Not like the one in her poem, because her poem, if you're not familiar, has got some really weird sexual undertones, which I don't like personally. I felt I had to do my due diligence in researching the Goblin Market and the original text, pretty much, if I'm going to be writing this book. So I read the poem, it gave me the ick, and then the rest of her poems were kind of mid. Again, not really a poetry person, so I don't feel comfortable rating this book, but I will say if you like poetry, maybe give it a go. I have nothing really to compare it to. The last time I read a poetry book was Old Possum's Book of Practical Cats, which is for children, so that's more my speed when it comes to poetry. So that was short and sweet. That took me maybe an hour to read. The next book I read was a 5-star. It was Ella Minnow P by Mark Dunn. This is I want to say it's speculative fiction. It's based on this fictional island called Nollop off of the coast of South Carolina. And this town was founded by somebody whose first name I've forgotten but was called Nollop. And he is the guy that came up with the phrase, "The quick brown fox jumped over the lazy dog," which is a sentence that uses every letter of the alphabet. And they basically worship Nollop. They have that sentence plastered on like the top of their town hall, and Nollop is a revered character in their lore, essentially, in like a founding father sort of way. One day, one of the letters falls off the town hall, off this sign from this sentence, and the council make the batshit decision that this is a sign from Nollop that they are no longer allowed to use that letter when they speak, when they talk, when they write, when they do anything. That letter is not allowed to be used anymore. And for reasons that I forget, people go along with this and they get used to living life without this letter. And then another letter falls off the sign, and then another, and then another. And each time the council goes, yeah, nope, that's a sign, we can't use that letter anymore. You are banned from using that letter in any way, shape or form. And it just gets more and more insane as the story goes on. It is a short book. It's only 200 pages. It's written in letters between Ella Minnow P, who is a girl living on this island, and her cousin, talking about how batshit this is. But what is cool is because it's letters between characters and they are banned from using these letters more and more as you get further into the book, the story stops using those letters. They have to get more and more imaginative and creative with their words, trying to avoid these banned letters. And so as the story progresses, their character arcs progress, and the state of their writing kind of gets more elaborate and then gets really, really like thin on the ground and starts feeling like almost a telegram or text speak. And it's so interesting. I really like language, and I thought this was a really cool concept as like an exercise in language, as well as just being an entertaining story to read as well. So yeah, 5-star book for me. I really, really enjoyed this. Did you enjoy it too? Yeah, Ratty enjoyed it too. At least one person is getting this book for Christmas. It was so good. I loved it. What's next on my list? Ooh, then I read Fairies by Fairies by Brian Froud and Alan Lee. I have owned this book forever, pretty much. That's a lie. I have known about this book forever, and I spent my childhood like flipping through the pictures because it's such a gorgeous book. I talked about it a little bit in my Goblins and Trolls video, but my mum had a copy and I used to flip through her copy growing up, and I loved Brian Froud's illustrations, and it was my first introduction to Alan Lee, though I wouldn't work out who he was until I watched The Lord of the Rings, which I then became obsessed with, naturally. But I love goblins, I love trolls, and I love fairies. So this book was like a fucking gold mine. It was like the pinnacle of books for me growing up. And then a couple of years ago, Mum got me my own copy, and it occurred to me recently that I had only ever looked through the pictures. I have never actually read the words in the book. So last month I sat down and I read the book front to back, again as inspiration for the story that I'm writing, because fairies, trolls, goblins, markets, like, it's all very relevant. But it's like a combination of mythology and legends around certain creatures, as well as just beautiful illustrations on every page. It's like half art book, half like legends and myths, essentially, as well as like made up lore about these creatures, and it's just wonderful. I really love it. So I was trying to work out what she was doing, but she's still chewing on the blanket. It's one of my favourite books, and I have started my mission of collecting Brian Froud's books, because I just want all the art. I just want them all. And I like, if I could just have my whole house covered in prints of his artwork, that would be amazing. I would be a very happy lady. Then I finished Furies, which is it's an anthology with an introduction by Sandy Toksvig. And it takes all of the insults given to women. Each one of the short stories is inspired by one of those insults. For example, harpy, the hag, fury, hello, siren, bitch. I realised I just listed a bunch of creatures in the beginning, but like all of those sort of negative words for women, takes those and it writes a short story that kind of flips them on their heads and makes you think about them and why they're used that way, and actually, are they that bad? I found it really interesting. My favourite story was definitely the first one, which was the Margaret Atwood story, which was the siren one, I believe, because it was this meeting of all of the female creatures across history coming together for this like knitting club, essentially, and it was the introductory speech to this knitting club, and it was just so funny the way it was laid out and phrased. And I don't think I've ever actually read anything by Atwood before, so I think that was a really good introduction for me. Some of the others were quite thought-provoking and some of them just didn't work for me at all, so it was kind of hit or miss most of the way, but I'm glad I own it just for that first story alone. I just thought it was really cool, mostly because it's centered around fantasy creatures, and we all know that I love a fantasy creature. But yeah, this was really good. This got me back into a little slew of anthologies that I've now started reading, because funnily enough, if you're in a bit of a slump, reading a short story is a lot easier than reading a novel. So I've read a lot of short stories in the last month. Hello, thank you. Then I read Days at the Murasaki Bookshop by Satoshi Yagisawa. This was a cover buy from Waterstones. I had sort of seen other people read it in like their wrap-ups and things, so I knew some people liked it and that it had some good reviews, but I wanted to see for myself, and it's centered around a bookshop. It's lit fic, I think, and it just centres around this girl who's lost her boyfriend, lost her job, and goes to live with her uncle in his bookshop. And it's told in two parts. It's essentially two stories, because the first part is about her and the second half is about her uncle, essentially. She is the main character throughout, though, but it just like it's like the author did one character arc and then finished it halfway through and then started the next character arc for a different character. It was fine. I think the only reason I carried on reading is because I did audiobook it in the end. I just had it on while I was commuting or walking or something. I can't really remember. But it was fine. It was mid. It was thought-provoking in some points. It was a little bit intriguing, but not super intriguing. And I overall just enjoyed the atmosphere of being in the bookshop and describing the books and the people that came into the bookshops, like the regulars going and sitting in coffee shops to read books. It was mostly vibes that I enjoyed this book for. The rest could kind of, I could take it or leave it. It was fine. If that's the sort of book that you like, you would probably enjoy it, but it's not always the sort of book I like. So then I read Morgan Is My Name by Sophie Keach. Now I am in two minds about this book because I struggled through the first half of it. It was interesting, but it's very like biographical. So there wasn't a huge amount of intrigue. There wasn't a huge amount of like fast-paced plot things happening, basically, which is usually what keeps me interested. It was much more sedately paced. It was a really interesting take on Morgan and her life growing up. I really liked the bits that were based in Tintagel because I've been to Tintagel, so I could picture it really like clearly. And I loved the way that she was portrayed. I loved the characters. I thought they were all really like dynamic. I thought they were interesting. I thought they didn't necessarily fall into the predictable stereotypes that it would be so easy to put them into because this is such a well-known tale. This is such a, like, stories in this era tend to be full of stereotypes just because of the nature of Arthurian tales. It is a stridently feminist book, and Morgan is a great main character. There are some great backup characters. There are some great secondary characters as well. There's queer rep in this, which I wasn't expecting. I could have done with it being a bit more fast-paced for me personally, but I'm not sure that that was the kind of book that it was. In my head, when I think about it, now that I've finished it and I've sat on it for a little while, I'm going, oh, I need to recommend this to everyone. Everyone needs to give this a go. I think, like, this person will like it. I think this person will like it. And then I think more about it and go, I didn't enjoy it that much. Why am I that keen to spread the word about it, if that makes sense? Like, why do I keep coming back to it? I keep thinking about it. And I think it's almost like a slow burn novel in the fact that, like, it may not have gripped me in the moment, but it has had a lasting impact on me, if that makes sense. I don't read a lot of novels like that, so that's kind of fun, but it's a bit of a new experience for me. And then finally, the last one I read was a children's book. It was The Skull by John Klassen. This is a cute little story about this girl who runs away and finds a house in the wood with a skull in it, and she befriends the skull and they have a fun little time together. Very short. I read this in like 15 minutes. The artwork is beautiful. It's gothic. It's spooky. It's very on the nose for this kind of season. And it's, I really like reading the author's note at the back because apparently he found this tale. It was based on an Alaskan folk tale that he found while looking stuff up in the library or something. But as time went on, he remembered the story differently and like more and more differently. And when he read the original story, he was surprised by how much he had changed in his head about this story and decided that he liked his version better. So he wrote it down. So I would be interested to read the original story if I can get my hands on it, I think, just to see what the differences were and what stuck out to him and what he kept and what adapted in his brain. I thought that was really interesting. But that was just like a short and sweet. I wanted something easy to read before bed. And it was enjoyable. And I would recommend it if you want something short and sweet with really cool artwork in it. That's quite sharp. Thank you. But yeah, that's all the books that I read in September. It is now the 1st of October. We are well into spooky season, aren't we, chicken? And I'm going to leave you to it because this blanket's getting quite soggy and I think it's coming through to my leggings. So we're gonna move the little chicken. And I will see you in the next video. Like and subscribe if that's your jam. And I hope you have a lovely day.